So, hello everyone. We are going to look on technology of fruits and vegetable lecture 1, which basically talks about fruits and vegetable in general, their types, their development, their maturity indices, what are the overall quality of fruit and vegetable required for harvesting. So vegetable and fruits have many similarities with respect to their compositions, methods of cultivation and harvesting, storage properties, and processing. In fact, when you look, many vegetables are considered fruits in the true botanical sense. Botanically, fruits are those portion of plant that house seeds. What are fruits? Fruits are those portion of plant that house seeds. Therefore, there are vegetables which house the seeds, but they are called as vegetables. For example, tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplant, peppers, okra, sweet corn, and other vegetables would be classified as fruits according to this definition. But when you look, the important distinction between fruits and vegetable has come to be uh, made on usage basis, like for example those plant items that are generally eaten with the main course of meal are often considered to be vegetables, and those that commonly are eaten alone or as dessert are considered as fruit. So this is the distinction made by food processors or maybe certain marketing laws and consuming public. So when you look for fruits and vegetable, there are certain general properties, and based on their general properties, they have been classified. Because vegetables, we know that they are derived from various parts of the plants. It is sometimes helpful to classify those vegetables according to the plant part from which they are derived, maybe such as roots, leaves, stems, buds, and so on. So look at this table in which the examples of specific uh, vegetables have been given. So for example, in case of roots, sweet potatoes. So when you look at this table, there are some examples. For example, roots. The example of these vegetables which comes under the category of roots are sweet potatoes, carrots. So further, if you look, the stems are also considered as a vegetable and consumed. The example of these modified stems are corms. For example, taro. Then we consume tubers, for example, potatoes, and the modified birds includes bulbs. Examples are onion and garlic. So likewise, you have herbage vegetables, which has leaves, and the example are cabbage, spinach, and lettuce. Further, leaf stalks in the form of petioles, which are consumed generally. The examples are celery, rhubarb, and there are flower birds too that are commonly consumed, and the examples are the cauliflower and artichokes. Further, the shoots and sprouts have been also consumed, with a very known example of asparagus and bamboo shoots. Look at these vegetables, which are fruits as per the definition. For example, legumes are classified. The sweet corn comes under the category of cereal, whereas if you look, the wine fruits, the example are squash, cucumbers, the tomatoes and eggplant comes under the berry fruit category, although they do not look like berries. Avocado, breadfruit are tree fruits which are consumed as a vegetable. So when you look at this picture, you see that the edible portion of most of the fruit is the fleshy part of the pericarp or vessel surrounding the seeds. Fruits in general, we know that they are very acidic or sugary. For example, tomato is acidic and pumpkin maybe is a sugary, and they commonly are grouped into several major divisions, like depending principally on botanical structure or chemical composition or their climatic requirement. We will be studying all that in detail. So, for example, berries are generally small and they are quite fragile, although cranberries are very, very tough. Grapes are also berries, but if you look at the grapes, they grow in clusters. Melons, on the other hand, are very, very large, and if you look at their skin, it's really, really very, very tough skin. Apricots, cherries, peaches, plums, and all kind of these contain single pits. We saw just now the photo of avocado, in which you saw that there is a single pit and are known as drupes. Further, poems contain many pits and are represented by, you have apples, you have pears, and if you look at citrus fruit, they have characteristics like they are highly acidic in nature because of the presence of citric acid. So you have grapefruit, lemons, which comes under the characteristics with a high citric acid. So, further tropical and subtropical fruits include bananas, dates, figs, pineapples, papayas, mangoes, and other, but not the separate group of citrus fruits. And these all require warm climate for growth. And in the upcoming classes or lectures, we will be discussing. So, just now we have seen that if you say fruit, the example of the vegetable that is consumed as a fruit having seed is a pumpkin. The fluorescence, inflorescence, the example is your broccoli. Main bud is your lettuce, which is a main bud. Stem or sprout, we consume stem and sprout, and the example is asparagus. Flower bud is artichoke. The seeds that we consume like corn, auxiliary bud is your Brussels sprouts. Petiole, like celery. Bulb is underground or bud onion. Stem tuber is potato. Solan tap is a root tap that is consumed, or tap root is a carrot. Root tuber is sweet potato, and so many other example. So if you look, fruits are basically the mature ovaries of plants with their seeds, and the edible portion of most of the fruit is the fleshy part of the pericarp or vessel. So, as I already discussed, that fruits are acidic and sugary, and they commonly are grouped into several major divisions, okay, depending on their various composition and other structural property. So, composition, botanical variety, cultivation practices, whether whether the degree of maturity prior to harvest and the condition of ripeness, storage condition, all these matters on the basic composition. For example, the variety. We see in the market there are two varieties of tomato. One is, traditional desi tomatoes, whereas the other one is variety is Vaishali tomato. Okay, so one is more juicy with more total solid content, whereas other is less juicy, less acidic in nature. The citric acid content is less. You see, there are number of different varieties of chilies that are available, and their composition of hotness, or the capsaicin that is contain the ingredient that is responsible for the hotness or the pungency, will vary as per the region to region. You must be aware, like the chili variety that you get in the Hyderabad region are different than that of the Aurangabad region. So variety varies because there are botanical varieties, cultivation practices, whether it is organically grown or using lot of fertilizers, the varieties are grown. Whether the weather is hot or whether it is humid or if it is a dry. Maturity, for example, tomatoes that are harvested immature and green in color, their lycopene content would be very less or zero, and their citric acid content or acidity will be very high. And as the tomatoes gets ripened off, what happens, the acid gets converted into sugar and other products and other vitamins, minerals, and other constituents in the fruit or vegetable changes. So all these factors prior to harvesting condition of ripeness matters. Of course, the storage conditions also affect on composition. So most of the fresh vegetables and fruits are very high in water. We all know that vegetables and fruits contains a lot of water, almost 90% of the water. At the same time, they are very low in protein content, they are low in fat content. So the water content is generally greater than 70%, and it is always frequently in most of the vegetable and fruits it is greater than 80%. Whereas if you look, the protein content is never it is greater than 3.5%, and fat content is never greater than 0.5%. However, dates and raisins are substantially lower in moisture but cannot be considered fresh in the above sense. We also consume lot of legumes such as peas and certain beans that are higher in protein. Okay, so exceptional. So sweet corn that is highly slightly higher in fat content. There are certain exceptions. Avocados are also one of the vegetable containing substantially higher fat content amongst all the vegetable. So vegetables and fruits are very important sources of digestible and indigestible carbohydrate. We all know that fruits and vegetable, their consumption around 25 gram of dietary fiber consumption is important to get lot of health promoting effect. Therefore, vegetables, because vegetables and fruits contain digestible as well as indigestible carbohydrate. So digestible carbohydrate means you have sugars, starches, and indigestible means cellulosic and pectic materials which provide fiber and which is also important to normal digestion. So important sources of minerals and certain vitamins. Okay, we all know that fruits and vegetables are very good sources of vitamin, and especially vitamin A and vitamin C. Further, we also know that fruits and vegetables, depending upon their color and variety, they are very good sources of beta carotene. We all know that beta carotene is a precursor of vitamin A, and along with beta carotene there are certain other carotenoids are also present, particularly yellow and orange fruits. We know that there are number of yellow and orange fruits. So example, citrus fruits are very sources of vitamin C. And vitamin C and its role, we are all very well aware that what is vitamin C. I'm sure in chemistry or food constituent you must have studied under the chapter vitamins. So this table overall gives you an idea about various food that we in day to day life consume and their constituent. So take an example of carbohydrate column. Okay, so if you look at the carbohydrate, the daily consumption of carbohydrate coming from various sources, mostly coming from the staples, like we consume wheat flour. In India we consume chapati, rice, so milled rice or white rice, or we also consume various other flours of millets and other things like sorghum flour or maize flour. Sometimes we consume the whole flours. Okay, so all these cereals have the carbohydrate content ranging from 70 to 80% maximum. And whereas if you have these vegetables, in the category of vegetable, we just now saw that there are root vegetable like earth vegetable. So potatoes, sweet potatoes, roots and tubers have a slight higher carbohydrate content. Otherwise, if you look for the other vegetables like carrot, asparagus, beans, snaps, green peas, and fresh lettuce, all of them have a carbohydrate content is very very low. So literally lettuce, which are leaves, you have the carbohydrate content is just 2.8%, whereas green peas, the carbohydrate content is slightly higher, that is 17%. Further, when you look at the fruits, banana, because it is very sugary, so the carbohydrate content in the form of sugar is 24%. Oranges has 11% of carbohydrate, apple has 15%, and so on and so forth. Further, when you look at the column of protein, the cereals are going on a higher side of protein, except for if you consume the legume protein like green peas, the protein content is 6.7. Otherwise, carrot has a protein content of just 1.1%, asparagus has 2.1%, and likewise. But if you go in the category of fruits, bananas have a protein content of 1.3, otherwise, melon has zero point 0.6, apple has the least protein content, that is zero point 0.3, whereas oranges shows 0.9% of the protein. Further, the fat column is the most important whenever to derive the calorific value or energy value of any fruits or vegetable. It is looked for its total fat content, because we know that carbohydrate gives 4 kilocalorie, protein gives 4.5 kilocalorie, whereas fat gives 9 kilocalorie per gram of fat. Okay, so again in this section also, cereals have a little higher sides of fat content. Corn containing 4.3% of fat, whereas wheat flour has approximately 2% of fat. But when you look at the vegetable, the fat content ranges from zero point 0.1 in radishes to zero point 0.2 in lettuce. So very very low fat content. Further, in fruits, if you look, there is a slight higher side fat content, but it is not much. That is, it's just melon, you see 0.2%, whereas banana has zero point 0.4. It's very very less fat content. And further, if you see cereals that are containing more water is very very less, that is just 12% of water. And you see melon, which has 92% or 93% of water, it's almost water. Lettuce also contains 94% of water. So all these fruits and vegetable contains a higher amount of water. So let us understand what is this cell wall, or what is this. In general, we saw the composition. Now let's understand what are the structural features. Okay, so the structural unit of edible part of most of the fruits or vegetable, this is of course the vegetable one, cell, vegetable cell. But if you look at the edible portion of most of the fruits and vegetable, uh, and that is the parenchyma cell. Okay, so although parenchyma cells of different fruits and vegetable is different, it is not very obviously it has to be different. We know that each fruit, suppose you take lettuce or spinach or cabbage or cauliflower or tomato, each one of them is so unique and so different, so obviously the parenchyma cells would be different. Some of them are different in sizes, some of them are different in appearances, so all of them have a differences. So all have essentially basically stay same fundamental structure. Okay, so parenchyma cells of plants differ from animal cells. Even animal cells have these parenchyma cells. So what is the difference? So parenchyma cells of plants differ from animal cells in that the actively metabolizing protoplast. Okay, so we have the protoplast. So this protoplast portion of plant cells represent only a small fraction. So in the plant cell the protoplast is just 5%, okay, of the total cell volume, whereas in the animal cell it is little bigger. The protoplast basically is like a little bit, I have a photo of a parenchyma. Yeah, so parenchyma is rather like film like and is pressed against the cell wall, okay, by the large water filled center vacuole. The protoplast has inner and outer semi permeable membrane. See, this is the cell wall, okay. So basically the protoplast is film like and is has pressed inside uh, against the cell wall by the large water filled central vacuole. See, this is the vacuole. The protoplast has inner and outer semi-permeable membrane layers between which are confined the cytoplasm and its nucleus. This is the nucleus and this is the cytoplasm. You see? So you have the cytoplasm and this is the nucleus, this is the vacuole, this is the cell wall. Okay. So the cytoplasm contains various inclusions because there are other things also. So what is there? This is your cytoplasm. So it has other inclusions, starch granules, you see, and plast, a myeloplast with the starch granules. Okay, you have chloroplast, you have other granules also if it is, so it is a chloroplast, chromoplast. So this is your chromoplast, this is your chloroplast. The cell wall, the cellulosic in nature, this cell wall is what? It is cellulosic in nature, contributes rigidity to the parenchyma cells. And you know that if you see the example of tomato, the cell wall is very very fragile, but if you see the other vegetable like rich gourd, after storage of certain period of time, this cell wall becomes more and more rigid. Okay, so rigidity, the cell wall or the cellulosic nature contributes rigidity to the parenchyma cells, and therefore it confines the outer protoplasmic membrane. Okay, the layer between cell wall of adjacent parenchyma cells referred as the middle lamella. This is the cell wall, and between these there are plasma lemma, plasmodesmata. So there are layers. Do you see? One, two, three, four. So these the layer between cell wall of adjacent parenchyma cells. They are called as a middle lamella. What is it consist of? Middle lamella is basically largely consist of pectic substances. Sometimes it consists of polysaccharides, or these polysaccharide materials then can act as a cement cells together. For example, as I gave example of rich gold, so there are a lot of polysaccharides. Air spaces also exist, especially at the angle between where several cells, comes together. So overall, it's a structure in which lot of things there. So these relationship between these structures and obviously chemical composition, as I said, there is also pectic substances between these. So you see that there are variety of fruits which has more pectin, like for example, if you see guava has more pectin, or if you take oranges have more pectic substances than other. So there is obviously a greater relationship between the structure and the chemical composition. Okay, so if you have pectic substances into it, the structure is going to be different. Okay, so parenchyma cells vary in size from plant to plant, as I said before. For example, in case of bacteria and yeast cell, this parenchyma is very very large. The larger parenchyma cells may have volumes maybe many thousands times greater than a typical bacterial cells. So there are several types of cells other than parenchyma cells that contribute to the familiar structures of fruit and vegetable. And in the upcoming lecture, we will be studying, and we will try to see how the processing, while as a food technologist, when we try to process these fruits and vegetable, how the structure, chemical composition gets affected. Okay, so, for example, these include various types of tube like conducting cells. Like you have in these tube like cells, you have a different content of water, you have different content of salts. So, such cells produce fibrous structure which can be then, toughened during storage. As I gave you just now an example of rich gold. Okay, cellulosic material or wood like substances, for example lignin. If you observe, lady's finger, so when you have these lady's finger or okra or bindi that we call it in Hindi, so when you bring this bindi fresh and you store it for a longer period of time, what happens? This bindi, the starch or the soft texture gets converted into lignin and cellulosic, and later on it becomes even very very difficult because the lignin content increases during the storage. So lignin pectic substances also occur, they keep changing. So of course, this will change because of various factors, uh, uh, composition, s- and all that. Okay, temperature of storage, skin, peel, rind, which part it is, and all. So as I said, parenchyma cells of different fruits and vegetables are different, and so how turgor and texture affects, okay, the chemical composition. So the range of textures encountered in fresh and cooked vegetable and fruit is you see there are a lot of different textures and turgors and uh, range of textures you get encountered. Okay, and so as I said before, there are a lot of cellular components which are responsible. For example, if you look at the watermelon, the outer covering of the watermelon is very very hard. And have you ever observed, if you keep the watermelon for a longer period of storage, what happens? the sugar content starts getting fermented, okay, and then from the inside it becomes very very loose and it gets degraded. So cellular component of effects on the texture. Another example, tomatoes. Okay, so initially the tomatoes which are little bit green, immature, they're very very hard, but over the period of time during storage, the hard texture of the tomato gets converted into softer, and then you keep the tomatoes as it is, and after many days what happens, the tomatoes becomes really really softer, okay. So the texture, same is example for fruits. You bring the bananas from the market, they are very very different in texture, and keep them for storage for a period of maybe 8 days, or during this time you see the lot of textural changes, it becomes soft, the taste changes, the texture changes, and lot of changes. So it is because of the components that are present, they are changing. Okay, we will be seeing what are the ripening changes. So generally, because this plant tissue contain many compounds, including more is your water, almost two-third is water. So there is a strong relationship between the other components and water, and therefore there are lot of textural differences that takes place. So water is in the large quantity. So cell turgor, the most important textural change, okay. So what is turgor? Turgor is the rigidity of plant cells which is resulting from being filled with water, okay. So if there is a lot of water, the plant cells are very very rigid. The state of turgor, which depends on also osmotic forces. What is osmotic forces? Most important factor that determine the texture of fruits and vegetables. So basically the cell wall of plant tissue have varying degree of elasticity, and they are largely permeable to water. We know that the cell wall of the vegetable is permeable. Good example is like, if you have leafy vegetable, or coriander leaves or methi leaves, you go to the market to keep them fresh. What this vendor do, he sprinkles a lot of water whole day, he keeps sprinkling, and he keep the vegetable fresh, okay. So it is because the cell wall of the plant tissue have a degree of elasticity. Also, the cell wall is permeable to water and iron, as well as small molecules, okay, small molecules. So the membrane of this living protoplast is a semi permeable, and that is why because of this semi permeable membrane, they allow the passage of water, okay, but it is selectively transfer also the other suspended material, okay. So these cell wall vacuoles contain most of the water of the plant cells. Within this water there are other constituent, we saw in the case of oranges or tomatoes, if you see there are sugars, there are acids, and then there are amino acids, and then there are variety of minerals, salts, there are pigments, like in tomato there are lycopene pigments, or other pigments, okay, flavonoids, tannins, polyphenols, vitamin C, vitamin A, and other low molecular weight compounds. So basically this vacuole has, along with the water, there are other also things, okay. So in the living plant, water taken up by the roots passes through the cell wall and membrane into the cytoplasm of the protoplast and into the vacuole to establish a state of osmotic equilibrium within the cells. Basically, the osmotic pressure within the cell vacuole and also within the proteoplast. See, if you see again in this figure, you have this plasma membrane, you have this primary cell wall, and then there is a middle lamella. Okay, so this is basically a plant cell wall structure, in which these are the pectins, the purple colored one, and these are the cellulose microfibrils. So they basically, the osmotic pressure within the cell vacuoles and within the protoplast pushes the protoplast against this cell wall and causes them to stretch slightly, because there is a lot of pressure buildup, because these molecule also absorbs the water. And according to the vegetable or fruit, the elastic property of this cell wall would vary. Okay, so these basically characteristics or processes that result into characteristic appearance of a live plant are responsible for like desired plumpness or succulence. For example, you have this bendy or lady's finger. So the succulence or plumpness depends on these characteristics: elastic property, how much it water absorb, and how much after absorbing it stretches. Okay, so much of the crispiness of harvested live fruits and vegetable all depends on that. So then, but at the same time, you also see there is a damage or plant tissues. If you do not stop, you generally see, if you pour a lot of water, the vegetable or fruits gets easily spoiled up. So when these plant tissues they can be damaged, or they can be also killed by storage, or if you keep them under frozen condition or refrigerator. For example, you cannot keep apple or banana in the deep freezer. If you have never tried, just for an experiment, you can try and watch the texture of the these fruits or vegetable. Or even if you want, just keep some leaves of methi or spinach or coriander in the deep freezer and see what happens. Okay, so basically what happens, these plant tissue are completely damaged, in fact destroyed or killed by these freezing, sometimes during storage or cooking also. Too much of cooking, what happens, the tissue becomes soft, and that is why we consume na. Suppose bindi, if you eat raw, you might not be able to digest, but if you cook it, what happens, the entire material gets softened up, and that is why you cook and you change or you damage the plant tissue. Okay, sometimes denaturation of the protein of the cell wall membrane also occurs, that resulting into loss of uh, perm selectivity. And without perm selectivity, osmotic pressure in the cell vacuoles and protoplast cannot be maintained, and water and dissolved substances are free to diffuse out of these cells, and they leave the remaining tissue in the soft and wilted condition. So let us look at the overall structural and chemical components of the plant cell wall. So for example, as I have already discussed, that vacuole contains water, inorganic salts, organic acids, all droplets like essential oil, for example lemon and orange, uh, naringine or grapefruit, water soluble pigments, amino acids, vitamins. So protoplast or protoplast membrane, maybe inner, which is inner is called as a tonoplast, contain protein, lipoprotein, phospholipid, phytic acid. Nucleus would have nucleus cytoplasm would have nucleoprotein or enzymes, nucleic acids. Then in the chloroplast, we know that there is a chlorophyll. In the mesoplasm, you have various types of enzyme, nucleic acid, and other metabolites. Mitochondria contains again, ferrous, copper, molybdenum, vitamin coenzymes, other enzyme, and other things. Primary cell wall contains cellulose, hemicellulose, pectic substances. A middle lamella also contains minerals like magnesium and calcium and pectic substances. And surface materials like cutin and cuticle contains long esters of long chain fatty acids and long chain alcohol. So when plant tissues basically are affected because of all these chemical constituent, the structure is basically because the structure has these chemical constituent, and obviously therefore the entire structure gets affected. Apart from the chemical composition, there are other factors also affects the texture. So what are those other factors? The other factors that affects on the structure or texture of fruits are cellulose, hemicellulose, or lignin content. So cell wall in young plants are very thin and they are composed of largely cellulose. Okay, as the plant ages, we know, as I gave you an example of lady's finger or rich gourd or bottle gourd. So when the plant or the fruits or vegetable, they age, the cell wall tend to thicken and they become higher in hemicellulose and lignin. So these five materials are fibrous in nature, they are very tough, and they are not significantly softened by cooking. And that is why when we demand for a good quality of okra or good quality of vegetable, we want them to be immature, we want them to be soft, so that we can cook them. And there of course chemical composition also varies. Further, the factor that is also responsible for affecting the texture is the pectic substances. So pectin and related substances are complex polymers of sugar acid derivatives. The cement like substance that is found especially in the middle lamella, which helps the hold plant cells to one another. We know that pectic substances basically they are present in the middle lamella. In the previous figure I have already shown you that they are found in the middle lamella, which helps in holding the plant cells together one another. And it is basically a water insoluble pectic substance. So during processing, what happens? Suppose there is any vegetable or fruit and that has pectic substances as well as acid. Upon hydrolysis, there might be chances that there is a hydrolysis. So this substance yields water soluble pectin, which can form a gel or viscous colloidal suspension with the sugar and acid. For example, a very good example is you have the tomato puree. So tomato has these pectic substances. So when you take out the tomato juice from the tomato, it is a thinner, but the moment you start cooking it, it forms a gel. It's because of the hydrolysis, and this insoluble pectic substances becomes water soluble and a water soluble pectin, and they form the gel. Also what happens, these water soluble pectic substances, we know that in the fruits or vegetable there are ions, metal ions, calciums, like metal ions, particularly calcium. So these water soluble pectic substances, they form an insoluble complex like water insoluble salts such as calcium pectate. And the various pectic substances may influence the texture of vegetable and fruits. Lot of changes keeps happening when you try to process the fruits and vegetables. So when vegetables or fruits are cooked, some of the water insoluble pectic substance is also hydrolyzed into water soluble pectin, and this results in a degree of cell separation in the tissues, and it contributes to the tenderness. Many fruits and vegetables are acidic, containing sugars like tomato. The soluble pectin also tends to form a colloidal sulfate. As I gave you an example of tomato, in which you have acid also, you have sugar also. The soluble pectin also, forms a colloidal suspension which thickens the juice or pulp. So when you are preparing, ketchup, it becomes a very thick mass. Apart from these pectic substances, there are natural enzymes also present. So these natural enzymes is a very good example is your pectin methylesterases. Those pectin methylesterases act on the pectin because pectin is the substrate, and therefore it loses much of its gel forming property. Tomato juice, tomato paste contain both pectic and pectin PME, pectin methyl. Even oranges contain pectin methylesterase. There are many fruits which contain pectin methylesterase, which is responsible for hydrolysis of the pectin. So, as I gave you an example before, that if freshly prepared tomato juice or paste is allowed to stand, what do you see? The viscosity gradually decreases due to the action of pectin methylesterase on the pectin gel. So, next factor that is also responsible for causing change in the texture is your starch. And as we have already seen, compared to cereal, the fruits or vegetable contain really very less amount of starch. So when starch granule absorb, we know that starch is a proper, the starch, like any starch, only any starch has a property to absorb the water, and the moment it absorbs the water and under the heat, it gets gelatinized. Okay, each starch molecule has a different gelatinization temperature. After absorbing the water at specific temperature, it gelatinizes, and because of the gelatinization, it loses its granular structure and it produces a pasty viscous colloidal suspension. Further, if you keep cooking, what will happen? The starch granule initially will absorb the water, they will get converted into gel. But if you further keep cooking, what happens? The swelling of the starch granule takes place within the cell of plant tissue on heating, and then if you further do not stop, these might get burst out, and the thickness of the solution then increases further. There are color changes that also affects on the quality, of course textural quality. And as I said, the green tomato example and the mature tomato, or green freshly harvested cucumbers and the uh, uh, stored one also. So color changes, so we know that there is a chloroplast. See, this is the chloroplast, and in the chloroplast you see these are the chlorophyll. Okay, so we know that, I'm sure in chemistry of food constituent you have already studied these pigments, chlorophyll. So chlorophyll basically are within the chloroplast, and they have a role in the photosynthesis. Uh, that is the photosynthetic production of you carbohydrate from the carbon dioxide and water in presence of sunlight. In presence of sunlight. Okay. So this bright green color of leaves, other plant part, is largely because of this compound called as a chlorophyll. Okay, so this is oil soluble. Okay, which in nature are bound to protein molecule in highly organized complex. You see, this is a porphyrin ring. Okay, so when plant cells are killed by aging, processing, or cooking, the proteins gets denatured, and you see there is a magnesium ion bound in the chlorophyll gets released, and when this magnesium ion gets released, this causes a chemical change of a chlorophyll to pheophytin. Okay, and this pheophytin is olive green or brown in color, and that is why when you have a fresh vegetable, they are green in color, because when they are green in color, this chlorophyll structure is in intact form. The moment you cook, the magnesium which is bound in the chlorophyll, it gets released, and because of there is a change in the chlorophyll to phaeophytin, and this phaeophytin is olive green in color. So conversion to phaeophytin is favored by acid pH, and it occurs less readily under alkaline conditions. So you use alkali so that you retain the original green color. So therefore, when you are blanching the peas or blanching beans, spinach or any green leafy vegetable, it tend to lose their bright green color. Okay, on cooking or heating, we know what is blanching. Blanching is a process or a heat treatment given especially to the vegetable to lot of advantages to get the green color. Also, if you blanch the material, the vacuoles will lose, air spaces will get filled up, and then that material which is already blanched can be easily used for canning or brining. Okay, the entry of the brine or sugar solution into the blanched fruits and vegetable is faster. Okay, so this bright green color on heating can be to extent protected against such color by addition of sodium bicarbonate or other alkali. Okay, even the addition of magnesium salt can help to reduce the conversion of chlorophyll to phaeophytin. So therefore, if you want to keep the vegetable as it is in green color, use the chlorophyll. So this practice is not looked on favorably nor used commercially because alkaline pH tends to soften cellulose and vegetable texture and to increase the destruction of vitamin C and thiamine at a cooking temperature. Further, what is carotenoids? Carotenoids are again that are the pigments which belonging to the carotenoid group, and again they are fat soluble. They range in the color from yellow to the orange to red in color. Okay, so they often occur along with the chlorophyll in the chloroplast, but also present in other chromoplasts, may occur free in fat droplets. Important carotenoids that include orange carotene of carrot, corn, apricot, peaches, citrus fruits, squashes, also the red lycopene of tomato, watermelon, and apricot. Apart from that, xanthophylls of corn, peach, paprika, squash, which are yellow orange in color. So also in the spice saffron, this yellow orange quercetin is also present, which is a pigment. And we know that there is a strong relationship between carotenoids to to vitamin A. We have already studied in chemistry of food constituent that how carotenoid gets converted to vitamin A. Okay, so some carotenoids some serves as precursor to vitamin A. So a molecule of orange beta carotene is converted into two molecules of vitamin A. So suppose you want to have vitamin A, so to have two molecules of colorless vitamin A within the body, a one molecule of orange beta carotene is converted. Okay, so one beta carotene is converted into two molecule of colorless vitamin A within the body. Some other carotenoids, there are many carotenoids, we know that alpha carotene, gamma carotene, then there are cryptoxanthin. They all are precursor of vitamin A. But what is the difference? The minor differences in the chemical structure, and therefore the conversion factor would be different. For example, in all of these cases, one molecule of each of these yield only one molecule of vitamin A. But in the previous case, there was two molecules of white colorless vitamin A. So, in food processing, these carotenoids are fairly resistant to heat, changes in the pH, and water leaching. But They are very, very sensitive. What? Sensitive to oxidation. Okay, very, very. We know that fat soluble or fat pigments or fat soluble pigments or fat itself is a very, very sensitive to oxidation, which result into both loss in the vitamin A activity as well as color destruction. So now anthocyanin pigments also belong to the group of plant chemicals known as flavonoids. So basically what are flavonoids? Flavonoids are water soluble and they are commonly present in juices of fruits and vegetable. So anthocyanin, like you have pomegranate juice, and the color that comes under this anthocyanin includes blue color, red pigments from the grapes, berries, blueberry, jamun, plums, even the eggplant which has that purple color, various types of cherries. But we have seen already in the previous classes that this anthocyanin pigment or the color of the anthocyanin is highly dependent on the pH, and therefore its estimation, the pH dependent method was used. Do you remember? So therefore many of the anthocyanin that are violet or blue in alkaline media, they become red on addition of acid. This is because they are completely dependent on pH. This color of red fruits and vegetable shifts towards violet and gray blue if the pH becomes little basic. So red anthocyanin also tend to become more red anthocyanin becomes more violet, blue or colorless on reaction with metal ion, which is one reason for lacquering the inside of metal cans when the true color of anthocyanin containing fruits and vegetables supposed to be preserved. For example, beetroot you want to preserve or canning of beetroot, okay, pieces. So in that case, it will be considered. The water solubility of anthocyanin also result in easy leaching of these pigments from cut fruits and vegetable during the processing as well as cooking. The next compound that is present in most of the fruits and vegetable affecting its texture is flavonoids. So what are flavonoids? Flavonoids are structurally very, very similar to anthocyanin, and they comprise a very, very large group of chemicals which are found in plant foods, and similar to other, they are also very sensitive to pH and tending toward a deeper yellow in the alkaline media. They tend to become deep yellow in color. Potatoes or apples become sometimes when you cook, potatoes and apple, what is the color? They become deep yellow in color when the water is little higher with the pH, alkaline pH, maybe between 8 7 to 8, okay, 8 or sometimes even higher. So the next compound that affects on the texture of the fruit and vegetable is tannin. We all know that tannins are complex mixture of phenolic compounds and they are found in plants, and under most of the circumstances they are colorless. But when there is a reaction with the metal ions, what happens? Along with metal ions, they form a range of dark colored complexes, and these red color complexes or dark color complexes could be either red, brown, green, gray or black, and they are responsible for the dark color found in bark of oak or other trees, okay. And there are various shades of these colored complexes that are depend on particular tannin and also the specific metal ions. The very good example is the water soluble tannins appear in the juices which are squeezed from your grapes or apples. So you ever squeezed an apple for the juice? You see it becomes literally brown in color, dark brown in color, because of the presence of these tannins. Okay, the color and also there are other example like brews extracted from teas and coffee, a very good example. The color and clarity of tea are especially influenced by hardness as well as pH of the brewing water. So, alkaline water that contain calcium and magnesium flavor the formation of dark brown uh, tannin complexes, and these tannin complexes they get precipitated when the tea is cooled. You see, you have ever observed that? So, if the acid in the form of lemon juice is added to such tea, what happens? Its color lightens. Please do this experiment. It's very, very easy experiment. Extract the tea and then squeeze little bit of lemon and you see what happens. Okay, the color lightens. And then why it lightens? The because of this lemon or acidity, it results into precipitation, and then this precipitate tends to dissolve because of the acidic condition. Also, sometimes iron from the equipment or from the cans that are pitted, that has caused a number of unexpected color to develop in the tannin containing products such as coca, coffee, food flavored with these compound. Okay, and tannin also, very, very important because we know that they are having a taste of astringency that influences flavor. We like the strong tea. Some people like the strong tea because of the astringency. Some people like black tea because of the astringency. So this flavor, this contributes this to the flavor. It also contributes to the body, to coffee, tea, wine, apples, beer, and apple cider and beer and other beverages. Of course, excessive astringency causes a puckery sensation in the mouth, which is the condition which is produced generally because of the a black tea. If you extract it more, what will happen? All of these tannins gets you know over extracted or over brewed, and therefore you have that puckering mouthfeel. Then you have the next one is your betalains. Like anthocyanin, these betalains are also red colored water soluble pigments, but they are chemically different and they are less widely dispersed in the plant world. And the primary food plant that is in which they occur are most common. The name itself says betalains means it is present in the red beet. They also occur in some of the cactus fruits and the cactus flower. And like other pigments, betalains also degraded by thermal processing, but occur in high amount that sufficient pigment remains for coloration. You know now beetroot or red beets are having these betaline compound in a very, very high concentration, so they are relatively stable compared to other natural red pigment. Especially we saw that the other pigments are highly unstable in the pH range up to 4 to 6, but especially in this pH range this compound is stable as compared to other pigments, and they have been considered for, therefore they can be used in using the natural food colorants because of the stability. So with this, thank you.